A very special water grand trine is going to be starting the end of October. It will last through all of November and into the middle of December. This is a long period of time to have a water grand trine active, flowing, and moving in the cosmos. So let's break this down a little bit because I want to share why this is important to be aware of in your own chart, as well as what is coming up here over this extended experience of a water grand trine. So it begins with Saturn in Pisces trining Jupiter in Cancer. This trine is a big deal. And in fact, in November, both planets will be at 25 degrees in their respective signs. So Saturn is here towards the end of Pisces, moving through big completions, wanting you to close out chapters that are meant to end so you can move forward. The Saturn in Pisces is bringing your attention to anything you have pushed away, where you've procrastinated, delayed, maybe things you haven't wanted to face. And Saturn says, we've got to take care of this. Saturn is about your responsibility and where you show up. You show up to move things forward, to be responsible, to honor your commitments. And in Pisces, again, it's things that maybe you just haven't want to deal with, but now it's time to. And there's support because Saturn is trining Jupiter in Cancer, which brings about a feel-good quality to what you are closing out and ending. This can enhance feelings of compassion, forgiveness, kindness. There's empathy here. But with Saturn, it's responsible empathy. There's a sense of, well, this is what I've learned, this is what I've been through and what I've experienced. And how does my emotional body feel? Those water signs are all about how we feel. And you could have a stabilizing influence here between Saturn and Jupiter, working in this beautiful, harmonious trine, which has little effort associated with it. Now, trines don't push us to change. They're happening, they're moving, they're flowing. Things feel easy, which honestly, we'll take that, right? We could use more of that. But there's a stabilizing maturity here in the emotional body. You might feel content and at peace around the past. Jupiter in Cancer. That Saturn in Pisces is bringing you to what you were learning, what you had to move through, what you had to have an experience around in order to grow and mature. I feel like both of these energies are going to validate where you've come from and what you've learned along the way that has shaped you, formed you, created you. There could be something here where you're in a deep acceptance around what was. You're not trying to fight it or overwrite it or think it has to look any different than it does. It is what it is. And perhaps there's a part of you that's in a deeper place of acceptance, forgiveness, love. And I think that is one of the higher expressions of this particular connection between Saturn in Pisces and Jupiter in Cancer. Now, this is the anchor, if you will, to the water grand trine. Both of these planets move slowly. So when they're in a trine like this, when they're both in water signs, it's a big deal. You might recall that back in 2024, and even earlier this year, we've been talking about how Saturn and Jupiter were in 3 squares. And those squares were happening when Jupiter was in Gemini, Saturn was in Pisces, too many choices, what do I do? what's the forward path, what is not worth my time. So they had a square, ongoing squares, I should say, since 2024. Now there's a resolution. Now there's something that clicks and connects because of how it makes you feel. It's an intuitive understanding. It's emotional. It connects to the heart. It connects to even a sense of this just feels good for me. This feels true. This feels pure. So our emotional bodies are giving us some clear messages here. And again, that could be what you need to make peace with and what you're willing to let go of now that maybe you weren't willing to let go of previously. So Saturn trining Jupiter is important astrologically. Then we bring into the equation here a rotating parade of planets through Scorpio. Now, because Saturn and Jupiter are in the third decan of these water signs, they're connecting at around 25 degrees. It means that any planet that moves into Scorpio and gets into that third decan is going to start to be in that water grand trine connection with these other two powerhouses. And so how we're going to see this play out is really fascinating because it involves all of the outer planets. That's the parade that's coming through here. The parade of planets is going to involve Mercury and Mars first, followed by the Sun, then Venus, all moving through Scorpio, right? Of course, the moon will traverse through Scorpio as it does every month. But then also we're going to have Black Moon Lilith in the late degrees of Scorpio. Isn't this fascinating? This is why the water grand trine is happening over an extended period of time. Because not only do we have all four of these personal planets moving through the late degrees of Scorpio, plus Black Moon Lilith, but then Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrogrades in the late degrees of Scorpio and re-enters this territory, which again continues to keep the water grand trine going. So we have a lot happening here in the Scorpio area of your chart. As each of these planets now in that third decan of Scorpio is deeply transformed and transforming. This is the area of Scorpio energies where you have faced a fear. You've been in maybe some of the darkness of an emotion, of an experience. Maybe you've done some shadow boxing, some shadow dancing. You've had to go into the depths of a part of yourself. Scratch that. Multiple parts of yourself that have been held back. Why am I saying multiple? Because each of these planets represents a different archetypal expression of self as it moves through Scorpio. So we are moving through very deep layers of ourselves through each of these transiting planets. It means that there will be a theme that's perpetuated, a theme that persists here. And the Scorpio energy wants the transformation. It wants you to get to the other side of whatever the fear is, whatever has been holding you back, whatever you have to look at to embrace it and welcome it forward. Basically, welcome it into your conscious self and allow it to be something that you can accept and work with from a more empowered place. So the parade of planets moving through the late degrees of Scorpio are going to be reiterating a theme. Mercury retrograde which starts November 9th and goes until November 30th, Mercury retrograde brings in new messages, brings in new information. Now, I always think it's fascinating when Mercury is in Scorpio, because Scorpio is the realm of Pluto, of Hades, and Hades rules the underworld. And Mercury is the messenger planet who can dive into the depths of Hades' underworld to get to the heart and the truth of a message. Mercury is agile, nimble, quick. He moves it right along. And so he goes into this underworld twice to get more of what he needs to understand. And so you may be surprised, actually, at how fast you're going to move through something and understand it at a deep level, at a deep soul level, and that it might be just this radical breakthrough in understanding more of who you are, more of your psyche, your psychology, your motivation, more of what has been working in the backdrops of who you are. And that's going to be a big part of this water grand trine. Because the energy is so active in Scorpio, we're going to be doing our research, investigative work, deep dive. Scorpio is the energy of how we merge with others, how we're able to face parts of ourselves in relationships and connections. It brings up vulnerability. It brings up things that, maybe you've had shame around. But when you're with a safe person, you can share that. Scorpio can guide you to therapists, healers, counselors, psychologists, people who can travel with you to discover what's been going on that you wouldn't have maybe ventured into on your own. So there's definitely an intensity here. Now, as these planets trine Jupiter in Cancer, it's going to pull you right back to your childhood or to early imprints. It's going to bring you back into a previous experience or something you've been through that now you're ready to transform and see it from a more empowered perspective. And as the planets trine Saturn in Pisces, I feel like this is where there could be a desire and willingness to take spiritual responsibility for your energy, your emotions, everything that this is about for you. And there's a sense here of it evolving and supporting your ascension journey from a mature, wise perspective. There can be monumental emotional growth here. There's going to be a lot of water flowing. There can be a lot stirring within you. There can be some deep emotions coming up from the depths of your unconscious or your subconscious. There could be things arising within you that you haven't looked at or thought about in years, and it comes forward and it's working with you at an emotional level. It can hit you in the heart. It can activate something in your emotional body. There's a lot moving through here that needs to flow and needs to purge. And something else I'm seeing is that as the parade of planets move through Scorpio, they're meant to be cleansed, if you will. They're meant to be transformed. Think about a dirty rock, a rock covered in mud. And then you put it under the faucet, and some of that mud doesn't want to rinse off. It's stuck on there. Takes more effort to cleanse the rock. But the point here of this water grand trine is to cleanse the mud, the muck, the density, the darkness, to cleanse all that off. And so at the beginning, it's the most work. It's the most dirt. Maybe the dirt is tar, which takes more work to cleanse it. But this water grand trine is going to move through us individually and collectively to purge and remove what has been stuck and stagnant. And it's meant to purify our emotional bodies. It's going to sharpen our intuition. You're going to feel more intuitive as the water grand trine unfolds. If you are comfortable working with the water element, depends on your natal astrology chart, of course, because if you're familiar with the water signs, then you've been living with this energy. But if you don't have water signs in your chart, or you have very few, you might feel flooded. You might have a flood of emotion, a lot of feelings coming out of the blue. You might feel very messy. You might not know what to do with it. You might, you're going to probably figure out, okay, I can't control this. It's just flowing through and moving through, and that's what water is meant to do. It's meant to flow. It's meant to be in motion. So depending on how you work with water sign energies will be a factor in how you experience this extended water grand trine. But ultimately, it's deeply transforming our emotional bodies so that we can hold more truth, we can trust ourselves more, we can tap into our intuition more easily and more readily. I'm also feeling like there's things that could come up at a collective level that spark collective emotions. And because I see this water grand trine as maturing us, we're going to have to be very aware of how we use our emotions, of how we run that energy through us, and how we experience it both internally and externally. So in your chart, you would want to look at 3 houses here, okay, where you have 25 degrees of Cancer, which is where Jupiter will be. Jupiter is going to move back and forth. Jupiter stations retrograde November 11th. Or is it November 9th? Sorry. I didn't check that before doing this. But Jupiter will station retrograde at 25 degrees of Cancer and then move backwards, of course, as every retrograde planet does. Saturn is going to be around 25 degrees of Pisces. That's as far back as Saturn goes. Then Saturn stations direct and will move through the final 5 degrees of Pisces. So you want to look for 25 degrees of Pisces. And then you're going to look at where you have Scorpio energies, around 25 degrees of Scorpio. So 25 degrees Cancer, 25 Pisces, 25 Scorpio. This is the general vicinity of the water grand trine. And we'll keep talking about this. I'll be discussing it on my Wednesday podcast. But just know that this means an extended water grand trine brings up more heightened feelings and emotions, more extremes, more that needs to be felt. You could seek more private time. You might desire to process things on your own, whatever might be coming up for you. There's just going to be a lot that, again, it needs to move through. We're cleansing parts of ourselves here. We're transforming it at a very deep level that ultimately benefits us. And that's why I see this as overall beneficial, because it's going to lead you to, again, those more mature perspectives and understandings. And you might feel that it powerfully shifts your emotional body. So, I know this was a lot, but thank you so much for joining me. I hope this gave you some good insights to look at in your own chart. And I look forward to continuing to discuss this with you again as it unfolds into the middle of December. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you back here soon for another video.